Hi friends, I hope you've had a good self-loving week. We're taking another step on this journey into self-love today as we explore how we make meaning, what meaning we make, and how our meaning making affects our love for ourselves. I'm excited to share this with you because I believe it's a deeply significant facet of spirituality that can really make such a positive difference in our lives. So let's begin by centering ourselves again. Do whatever helps you to feel comfortable and grounded, and take a moment to prepare your heart and mind for today's practice. And when you're ready, take a moment to check in with yourself. And today I invite you to call to mind 3 things that bring meaning to your life. Sit with them for a moment and explore them in your mind in more detail. What makes them meaningful for you? How do they add meaning to your life? And make a note of anything that you might want to spend more time with later. And then make some time now just to be with yourself. You may want to pause the video as you do this. And now, if it's helpful, you may want to share in this prayer. I'm so grateful to be part of the becoming of the universe, that my short little life participates in the expansion of life, the evolution of being, the awareness of consciousness, the deepening connection between all things. I'm grateful that I have the power to find, create, share, and shape meaning in every moment, experience, and event that comes my way. I'm grateful that I'm not at the mercy of the stories I am told or that I tell myself. I have the power to choose the most meaningful and life-giving story for myself. And so today, in gratitude and strength, I choose what my life means, what my world means, what myself means. And I choose to tell stories that liberate, heal, and inspire me toward my best and most whole life. In 1986, the Guardian newspaper brought out an advert that I've used often because it speaks so much to the meaning we make. It comes in 3 parts, and I want to just show you the first part now. And as you watch this, I want you, just with yourself, to describe what you see. But the important thing is describe it, don't interpret it. Just describe what happens. Try not to make any meaning of it. So take a look at this now.
An event, seen from one point of view, gives one impression.
So, what did you describe in that first video that we've just watched? Many people say things like, oh, he's running away from something. But can you see how that word running away, that's an interpretation. Really all we can say is he's running. So try again with the second part of the clip. And again, just describe, don't interpret.
Seen from another point of view, it gives quite a different impression.
So what did you see happening in that section of the video? And again, were you tempted to add words like he grabbed or he attacked? Anything that interpreted what you saw as the one man took hold of the other? So let's see from a different perspective and see what that says to us about what we've seen in the previous 2 clips. So take a look now.
But it's only when you get the whole picture you can fully understand what's going on.
I hope you can see how what we've seen in this final clip adds a whole different meaning to what we saw in the first and second sections of this ad. And how easy it is for us to interpret wrongly, and how important it can be sometimes to withhold our interpretation and just try and describe what we see. But the other thing I hope you've seen as we've watched this ad and worked with it is how we are inherently, unavoidably meaning-making creatures. We can't help but make meaning of what we see. And often we don't realize that what we're doing is making meaning. We think that our meaning is inherent in what we're seeing. We think it's part of the fact. We don't see it as an interpretation. And it's really important that we learn to separate our meaning-making, our interpretations, from what we see, from, if you like, the facts of what are going on around us and within us and in our relationships. But we make meaning of everything, don't we? We see human faces in our cars. We constantly interpret and impute meaning to the behavior of our pets. We find meaning in every expression on our loved ones' faces, and we seek meaning in all of life's events. We say things like, everything happens for a reason. And I really encourage you to watch the TED Talk by one of our tribe members, Clive Vanderwagen, who speaks about, does everything really happen for a reason? It's a great talk. Track it down on TED and watch it. Do yourself a favor. It's really worth it. We say things like, oh, it was meant to be. These are meaning-making phrases. But what we don't always realize is that our meaning-making can harm us or help us depending on how we work with it. And that's particularly true when it comes to how we love ourselves. And so a really important question to ask ourselves and to develop a good answer to is this: what do I mean? So think about that for a moment. What do you mean? What is the meaning of who you are, of your life? How do you understand that meaning? We need to work with this question. And we need to work with meaning-making in general if we are to love ourselves well. And we need to do it on at least two significant levels. Firstly, when we're not aware or intentional about our meaning-making, we find ourselves at the mercy of the stories we tell or are told. And as we make meaning about the world, so we begin to tell ourselves stories about the world, our place in it, and our value relative to others. But those stories are stories that are given to us, stories that we've accepted, not necessarily stories that we have created. And so we end up at their mercy. And it's almost impossible to love ourselves well when we are at the mercy of the stories told to us or that we tell about ourselves. And so it's a significantly loving thing to be proactive and intentional about choosing and telling our own stories and making our own meaning. It's a way to love ourselves and to love others as well when we do that. And then the second level at which it's important for us to do this work around meaning making is that when we make meaning about ourselves, we shape who we are. Our meaning affects how we relate to others, how we present ourselves to the world, how we feel about ourselves, what we do or don't do, what we're willing to try or not try, and whether we love ourselves or loathe ourselves. And so it's really important that we are thoughtful, reflective, intentional, and wise about how we make meaning, especially about ourselves. Yes, we need to draw on the insights of science. We need to learn from trusted spiritual teachers and texts. We need the wisdom of psychology, neuroscience, and other disciplines. But we also need to do the work to apply what we learn from all of these things to our own being and behavior. And then we can begin to tell stories that aren't just fantasies that help us avoid dealing with our baggage or mean that we don't have to face reality, but rather stories that help us to navigate the world in healthier and more creative ways. Stories that empower us to show up more fully, authentically, and creatively in our lives and relationships. I mean, just as a silly little example, for me, discovering the Enneagram was an amazing moment. And finding out that I'm a 5, I mean, that was a real turning point in my own personal meaning making and in finding a better, more life-giving story about myself. Now, yes, we know this. Meaning making is incredibly subjective. Events are just events. If we were to just describe them the way we tried to do with that Guardian ad at the beginning of this practice, we would experience them so differently. Even our descriptions would be different from one another. But the truth is, we aren't really able to just describe things. We make meaning. And our meaning is not inherent in the event, it's inherent in us, which means it's not a fundamental truth, it's not a fact. Our meanings, in a real sense, are always made up. And that means that we can take control and we can choose how we will make meaning and what meaning we will make. Here are some thoughts about how to use meaning making to love yourself a bit better. First of all, question every bit of meaning you make. Try as far as you're able to withhold your interpretations. Avoid quick judgments and certainly avoid certainty around the stories you tell. And as much as possible, take time to try and get as close to just a plain description of what is happening or what you're experiencing, and to gather as much data as possible. And then when you've done that, when you've kind of put the step between the event, the phenomenon, and your interpretation, you've kind of created another step in between them. When you've done that, then you can be intentional and positive in your meaning making. But remember to always hold your meaning making lightly. And then secondly, be proactive and intentional about choosing the story you want to tell about yourself, your world, your life, and your place in the big scheme of things. I posted a quote in the tribe a few days ago from Nadia Boltz-Weber, and I invite you to go back and look at it, where she speaks about how we have the capacity to choose stories that are more positive, more healing, more life-affirming. And so it's an important thing that we do that. Since we can choose our story, why not make our stories good ones, hopeful ones, encouraging ones, life-giving ones? And then thirdly, don't automatically accept the meaning that others make about you. And I want to suggest that that includes what people tell us about God's view of us. Yes, it can be helpful to think about how God loves us and how we're special in God's eyes. But ultimately, it's still possible to hate yourself while believing that God loves you. And so it's healthier, I believe, to begin with your own view of yourself. Yes, it's wonderful that God loves you, but it's more important in terms of your own health and well-being that you love you. And so avoid getting hooked on people's praise or criticism, even if it's God's. When your sense of worth hangs on the opinions of others, it's impossible to love yourself. And it's also very hard to have the important conversations with others about yourself that could lead to growth and self-knowledge and help you to find your best version of yourself. Those hard conversations where you have to look at yourself in ways you may not want to. But when your sense of worth hangs on a more life-giving and affirming story of yourself, you can go into those conversations from that place of strength and that place of feeling good about yourself, and it makes those conversations easier and more possible. I could go on and on about this, but I want to end with this. Meaning making is impossible to avoid, but we can be intentional about it, and we can learn to make meaning more wisely and objectively. And when we take control of our stories, we give ourselves a better chance to create a positive sense of what our lives mean. And from the sense of what we mean, flows compassion for ourselves. And that becomes the fountainhead for our love of ourselves. So if we are to love ourselves well, we need to make meaning well. Sit with these thoughts for a few moments. What thoughts, emotions, physical feelings, or questions arise in you? Be sure to journal anything that might need more attention through this week. And now take some time to check in with yourself and listen to what your deepest self is saying. Make a note of at least 3 things that help you to feel that your life is meaningful. They can be the same ones you brought to mind at the start of this practice, or they can be different things. But take a moment to create a simple ritual that will help you to integrate these things into your life in a deeper way, so that you can feel a deeper sense of meaning in your life. Your ritual can be as simple as having 3 candles, one for each of your meaning-giving things. And you can light them each day as you remember those things. Or you can make an altar with symbols or pictures of these things. Or you can create affirmations to say each day. Whatever works for you is great. But create a ritual around these 3 things that bring meaning to your life so that you can work with them. And you may also want to spend some time this week journaling about your meaning making and about the things that bring meaning to your life. I invite you to take a moment now just to think about what rituals you'll use, and you can pause the video as you do that. And now when you're ready, bring your practice to a close in whatever way helps you to prepare for the challenges and joys of your daily living. As you go through the week ahead, I encourage you to be aware and intentional around your meaning making. You might also want to write a love letter to yourself, as we've been doing through this series, and this time focus on the 3 things that you've identified that help to make your life meaningful. As always, you can either write a little each day or write the whole letter at once and then return to read it each day. The key is to find ways to be intentional about your self-love through the week. And that's the end of today's practice. I hope you found it meaningful. See what I did there? How do you work with meaning making in your life? What experience do you have of changing your stories from unhelpful ones to more meaningful ones? What suggestions do you have for working in a more intentional way with the meaning we make of ourselves? Drop a note in the comments and share your thoughts. Thanks so much for sharing this practice. See you next time.